Since being appointed Minister of Human Services, I've had the distinct honor of working very, very closely with some members of the Calgary Police Service, and I want to thank them very much, obviously starting with Chief Hanson. Chief, thank you very much for your time and your personal support of our initiative here today, and many others that we're working closely on. So thank you, Chief, and thank you very much to Deputy Chief Deroux, who's actually a member of our implementation team as well, to bring changes to the child intervention system. And of course, Jazz Kainth, thank you very much for your personal support in this as well. It's a great day when you get to stand with your partners in policing and be able to bring forth changes that will better support some of our most vulnerable children. As Alberta's Minister of Human Services, my top priority is to improve the services that keep children healthy and safe. That's really the work of our caucus, the work of our government, my colleagues Jason and Linda. I mean, that's why we're in this business. So in the past 120 days, we've taken significant action to build a culture of continuous improvement and to help get results quickly. To date, I've brought forth the 5-point plan in improving the child intervention system. We've made announcements of 4 new parent link centers and 2 satellite centers, which actually includes one here in North Calgary. We've expanded home visitation practitioners with more training to screen for things like family violence, invested $5 million in more mental health supports for vulnerable children coming into care, and specialized centers to help children that are in care deal with mental health issues. And I've really embarked on an initiative to call upon Albertans to step up and to be mentors for our children in care. We have nearly 8,000 children in care, and I think every single one of them deserves to have someone in their lives that can serve as a positive role model. We're working towards a very robust data sharing system to support better results for kids. In addition, in the speech from the throne, I outlined my commitment to extending the age for kids receiving services from 22 to 24. This is something that will make a tremendous impact, positive impact on the lives of our young people in care. And in our commitment to openness and transparency, I'll be bringing forth legislation in very short order to lift the publication ban on child deaths and strengthening child death review processes. Some of our changes will come in recommendations from the 6-member Implementation Oversight Committee, which was appointed to accelerate activity on my plan. Again, I want to thank Deputy Chief Trevor Deroux for his involvement on that team. And I've got to stress that this is one of the first times that instead of putting together a team to come up with more reports that look great on walls, we've put together a team to focus on results-based ideas that we can implement immediately, to come forth with recommendations on action, immediate steps that we can be taking. Finally, we had our 2-day round table with experts, with those involved in the child intervention system, and we've put out the draft report for public comment. My pledge to Albertans is to accelerate action where it's needed to improve supports for vulnerable Albertans. It's often said, we all know this, we've all heard this, that the measure of a society is how you look after your most vulnerable. Well, we need to walk the walk in this respect. We need to make continuous changes and continuous improvement to make life better for Alberta's most vulnerable children. That means parents and communities, police organizations and governments all working together. So today, as a part of our continuing evolution, as part of our continuing evolution of our relationship, I should say, we're bringing forth new changes that will strengthen the relationship between the Calgary Police Service, and hopefully other police services will subsequently follow, and our department. We will work closely with the Calgary Police Service to fast-track criminal record checks, The intent of this is to allow children to be placed with some family members or people they know they are comfortable with sooner. So when a child is coming into care, we can now have an expedited process to allow for children to be placed with someone they know and they love sooner. Every hour, every minute, every day counts in those cases. When a child has seen trauma, when a child has been exposed to something very traumatic, and they're being uprooted and put into someone else's home, that adds to the trauma. So I want them to be with loved ones, people that are safe, and the Calgary Police's commitment and ability to fast track that assessment process for us is a huge step. This, as I said, will help reduce trauma that these children experience. We have about 1,700 children in care who are in kinship care placements today. That's about 23%. That is not sufficient. These numbers need to go up. We need more children in kinship care placements because all the science, all the research, all the data tells us children thrive when they're in a setting where they're safe and they're loved and it's somebody that they know and they connect with. This specific agreement will also allow us to allow our caseworkers to get immediate information about people in homes they are visiting who may contribute to a potentially volatile situation. So what that means is our workers will have the ability to pick up the phone to get information about others that may be living in a home. So they don't have to rely on a gut feeling. They can have information that allows them to make better decisions about others that may be living in a home. So if mom has a couple new friends that are sleeping in the living room, our workers will have the ability to access information, good information from police services that will allow them to make better decisions. It means that police, on their part, can work with our folks and know when they're dealing with a child who may be coming from a very traumatic and difficult situation. So police, on their part, will be able to make referrals to our department. They'll be able to inform our department when they're dealing with somebody that has involvement in the child intervention system. Again, allowing for better decision making and better outcome for our children. And it allows our workers to be safer. Our workers will have the ability to pick up the phone and say, I'm being called to something at 1 a.m. Is there anything I need to be concerned about? And when needed, police can join our workers. So this is a huge step for the safety, the protection of our workers, but most importantly, the children. Our next step will be to work on the strength of this particular relationship and agreement and see how we can better apply this as a best practice throughout the province. I'm told that this is a first of its kind partnership, and I'll tell you that as two organizations working on the front line, it only makes sense that our organizations work closely together to better protect children. So with that, I want to once again thank Chief for his tremendous leadership in allowing us to coordinate our efforts, to make continuous improvement in our systems, and allow for a stronger relationship on the front lines that will allow for quicker checks, that will allow for better information sharing so we can make better decisions, and our workers and your police officers can make better decisions to help young people in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I just want to thank you personally for your leadership in getting this agreement moved forward. It'll be significant for the caseworkers in our region to get this information quickly and timely so we can ensure kids are placed in the most appropriate placements. At this time, I'd also like to ask Chief Hanson to come up and say a few words regarding the agreement.
Thanks, John. Minister, Mr. Koskas, And pleased to see Linda Johnson and Jason Luan here, both MLAs. We in the police cannot overstate how much we appreciate the leadership of Minister Buehler in leading this initiative forward. For too many years, government agencies, police included, have operated in solitude. And for too many years, we haven't shared the information that is vital for the safety of kids and families. We all bring a piece to the table that, if shared, escalates the safety that can be provided, not only, as the minister said, for those that are on the front lines that are working, but also information that will allow to make better decisions around the safety of kids especially. And without that leadership, without the trust that is developed between our agencies through initiatives like the Child at Risk Response Team, like AVERT, the Alberta Vulnerable Infant Response Team, like the Sheldon Kennedy Child Advocacy Center, we never would have got to this point today. We all deal with confidential information that is very important that it stays confidential. But just because it's confidential doesn't mean it can't be shared in the right circumstances when you can absolutely assure that you're making better decisions because that information is shared. So it takes trust to make those types of decisions. It takes leadership to move forward in allowing the environment to happen, to occur, to exist, that allows better decision making to occur through this sharing of information, and that's what's been provided by the minister here today. So for those that are here, thank you for being here, because I know all of you have read over the years different news stories from all over Canada and all over the world where when something bad has happened and inquiries are done, it gets traced back to where there's information that somebody says, well, if we'd only known that, we wouldn't have done this. Well, you know, we're getting to the point now where we trust, agencies have the trust, individuals have the trust, that we can more effectively share that information, with the end goal being that ultimately we can elevate the safety of those most important to our society to a point where it'll be the exception to have those individuals in risky situations. We'll elevate it to the point where by sharing information we're maximizing the safety for those that need it the most. And I can't thank, on behalf of the 2,000 men and women of the Calgary Police Service, Minister, thank you for allowing us to be a part of this, because not only will it make our jobs better, but to have another partner at the table every day to work on those things that our officers are passionate about, that your people are passionate about, is just a huge step forward. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Chief. Next, I'd like to introduce Mahdi Kaskas, who works for the Muslim Council of Calgary and works in partnership with Calgary and Child and Family Services around the recruitment of kinship homes and making sure that we're placing children immediately in kinship. So I'd like to invite him up to speak briefly about the agreement and the benefits of that. Thanks, Mahdi.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank Minister Manmeet for taking leadership on such an initiative. I'd like to thank Chief Rick Hanson and the Deputy Chief and our MLAs and Mrs. Khan, of course, a pillar in our community, I know that, and the colleagues in the audience. I think, you know, I have to apologize before I begin, because I'm not used to this type of venue. I'm used to talking to many more people, but I'm familiar with who I'm talking to. And that's really the theme of what I want to briefly talk about, and that's familiarity. When a child is familiar with his or her surroundings, they thrive better, like the minister mentioned. And when we place children in loving, caring, familiar settings quicker, it's better for their overall quality of life. The research shows it. We know this logically. We can see that, you know, if we're uncertain about an environment, we get a little anxious. Right? So even though I can stand here and ask for another chance if I make a mistake. We can't expect that from families that are unfamiliar with the children's culture and their way of life. So I'm really excited about this initiative of cultural kinship, which focuses on finding those families that are familiar with the child, that are already familiar. They're existing supports for this child. I think through the partnership with Child and Family Services and the great work that John is doing and his team, and what we've been doing together is we're making that process happen quicker through a systematic way of building a working alliance. So, which basically means we have mutually agreeable goals. We know what the outcome is, and that's child protection, child safety, child enhancement. And we have mutually agreeable tasks that we know what it is we need to do to get to those goals. And that happens through continuous dialogue, through consulting the literature and the research and the evidence and what's out there, what we know works. And then finally, the most important piece is the bond of trust between the stakeholders and the community. I mean, every community has formal and informal supports. It's my hope that by working together, we can find out the best supports, share that information in the best way, and make that assessment happen quicker, and bring these children to homes that are familiar, that are loving, and that are caring. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. It's clearly through those partnerships with the Muslim Council of Calgary and the City Police that we're going to be able to place children immediately in homes that are culturally appropriate and loving for them. I'd like now to ask the Minister and the Chief to come to the signing table and sign the agreement. After that, we will take questions. We'll take any questions from the media.
So I'm not sure if this will be a better question for the Chief or the Minister, but just on the actual fast tracking of the actual checks, if you could talk a little bit about how long those checks take currently, and eventually what these measures will do to actually fast track in terms of how long they'll actually take.
I can't speak to currently because there's a process that the folks use in People Services. But what we have is we have the ability, we're a 24/7 operation. We have our real-time operations center that allows access, which we use on a regular basis during the course of the week, to access all current information in regard to events that we're dealing with at the time. What we're saying is that that information now, the ability to do security checks, addresses checks into backgrounds and histories is now available with a phone call. And that phone call can happen at 2 o'clock in the morning, or it can happen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It doesn't matter. We're going to be available to make sure that the most current information we have is there so that a quick decision can be made, or a quicker decision, hopefully, with current information that they get right now relative to whatever the situation is that's being dealt with.
So are the background checks, this is specifically for kinship situations? It doesn't regard like all criminal background checks?
Go ahead, Minister.
Yeah, this is dealing with kinship situations for starters. There's a few different elements to this. One of my goals is to increase the number of placements we have in kinship care. So if something happens at 11 p.m. at night in a particular home, and we make an assessment by 2 a.m. that child needs to be taken into care, then by 3 a.m. I'd like that child to be with a loved one as opposed to be with a stranger. That's my focus on kinship care. One of the challenges we have in that is being able to do the assessments quick. One of the most important tools we have is the Calgary Police Service has information about safety. So we can make those assessments about safety a lot quicker. So the kinship care part of this agreement is one part of it, to help people get into kinship care as soon as possible. And the other parts of this is for our workers to be able to access really essential information. So they can pick up the phone and say, you know, I'm dealing with situation X, and there's a new person on the scene. We don't know anything about them. They're not providing us with any further information. Can you tell me if there's anything I need to be concerned about? Very powerful information that can help lead to better decision making.
Chief, can you go into just what those checks will involve on the police end? Is it a check of internal police databases like PIMS, or are you also querying CPIC as well?
Well, whatever information. We have multiple information systems that could be relevant. So we'll be accessing them all. And that would include the two that you mentioned, but also any other ones that are there. And just to speak to another potential situation, our officers are out there 24/7, and sometimes we go to addresses where our officers are stepping into a serious situation. And if we have, and there may be kids involved in that situation, there may be kids resident in the house, and if we know that those kids happen to be within a system already, then we can share that information with the right people at the right time so that it's more immediate. So it's mutually beneficial on both sides of the equation. It's not only identifying a safer location in the short term, but also if we identify kids that are at risk ourselves in a situation where we need to get that information immediately back to social services. But we access all our information databases, and as this grows, as we hope it will, and involves more police services, then hopefully even the databases of other police services to make it for a more comprehensive check.
Historically, you know, CPIC is something that's been governed by some very strict regulations in terms of when officers can access it and under what kind of circumstances. Did you have to take any privacy considerations into account, you know, in that hypothetical situation where you just want to check if the person who's couch surfing may or may not have a criminal record? I'm just curious about an instance where you're checking to see if someone has a criminal record as opposed to, you know, an active police investigation with CPICs being queried.
Well, and just to make it clear, the Canadian Police Information Center is about this much information on a spectrum of this much information. CPIC is very, very limited. It's got limited utility. And so is it something that we would check? Absolutely. And that could be what is one of the determining factors. If we go in there and arrest somebody for an outstanding warrant that's out of Canada-wide warrant out of another province, and there happens to be an in custody, or if there's a child in there that's one of the ones that we're speaking of here today, then that's valid information. Our world is about protection of privacy, but it's also about sharing information. Freedom of information is the part that's most often forgotten. FOIP legislation says freedom of information and protection of privacy. So protection of privacy is a very valid thing that drives what we do. But by the same token, we're not going to protect the privacy of an individual who's a pedophile in another province if that person happens to be in proximity to a child at risk. So we balance that every day. That's what we do. But we also, the paramount consideration is always the protection of those that are most vulnerable. In my opinion, absolutely. Absolutely. The more the key government agencies work together, share information, trust each other, the greater the likelihood that down the road you're going to prevent harm happening to those that don't have a voice. And what I'm talking about is not just kids. I'm talking about those that are involved in those situations, whatever that may look like. So down the road, do we anticipate that this is going to prevent bad things from happening, up to and including saving lives? Absolutely, we believe that to be true.
Can you walk me through the timeline of implementation? Is it going to be a pilot project first, right? Like the time? This is yours. All guns blazing right on, sir.
Yeah, guns blazing might not be the right when you're standing next to the chief. You know what? I'm really trying to embed a new culture within our systems. Governments are often so afraid of taking steps unless those steps are absolutely finite. You know exactly the outcomes to a T. What I'm trying to say is we need continuous improvement. We need to move forward in spite of fear of perfection. You know, we're not always going to seek perfection. We need to move forth, make continuous improvement. That's what I expect here. We're going to move forth immediately. We're going to start assessing the system as we go. We're going to make changes where we need to. The point is, there's a lot of young people that rely on us today. A lot of children whose safety is in all of our hands, in the hands of government, in the hands of police, in the hands of community and parents, all of us. And we all got to find ways to work together, and this is one example of that. But it's about a culture of continuous improvement. So we'll make changes, we'll make assessments, and there won't be, you know, there aren't blankets, you know, in every case either. You know, it'll depend on the severity of situations. In some situations there might be more extensive checks done, but in other cases there may not be as extensive checks done. It depends on the particulars of the situation. But again, I can't stress enough that this is about taking a series of steps to achieve better outcomes for our young people.
This is a little off topic, but in your opening statement, I just wondering if you could elaborate, Minister. You talked about pushing to lift publication bans on child deaths. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little on that.
Sure. So, you know, I've made public comments about this from the first one of the first media availabilities I had as Minister of Human Services. My belief is if a child passes away in the system or a child passes away that was involved in the system in some capacity or another, it's not up to me, the government, or you, the media, to be determining if that child's story should be told. It's up to those that are closest to that child to make that determination. It's not up to me, the government, to make that determination. It was their child who passed away. So those closest to the child are the ones that need to be making that decision.